Your guide to Latin future tense. On the timeline of Latin verbs, the present tense takes place in the present. The perfect tense took place in the past, and the future tense will take place in the future. Now, just in case you need a reminder of how to translate the perfect tense, in 1996, the New York Yankees won the World Series. If you didn't get that, the New York Yankees won the World Series in 1998. In case you didn't get that, they also won in 1999 and 2000 and 2009, just in case you didn't understand. Now, in case you don't need a reminder of how to translate the present tense, the current Yankees are full of cheaters and really old guys well past their prime. The baseball nerdy projections have the Yankees winning 80 games this year. That is, the New York Yankees win 80 games while coming in well behind the Boston Red Sox in the standings. However, I believe that in the future, the Yankees will win the World Series, and the Red Sox will be hung out to dry over an open fire. Now for a quick review of Latin verbs. Now, if you look in the Latin dictionary for the verb to win, you'll find winco, wincare, wiki, victus. This is, of course, where we get winny, witty, wiki. Now, these are known in proper society as the principal parts of the verb. When you are translating from the perfect tense, like when the Yankees won the World Series, you'll be using the third principal part, wiki. However, when you translate the present and the future tense, Yankees win or Yankees will win, you'll be using the second principal part, also known as the infinitive. Along with that, Latin verbs are part of one of 5 different conjugations. First, second, third IO, or fourth conjugation. Verbs in each conjugation are distinguished by the way they end their first and second principal parts. Each has a different ending pattern. O-are, eo-ere, o-ere, eo-ere, or eo-ere. The verbs reflect those ending patterns when you put them into Latin sentences. However, notice that the third IO, and fourth verbs all end up having endings with I. They'll be significant later. So I don't know who came up with the Latin language. Let's assume it was some guy who looked like this. Let's call him Steve. Now, let's say that Steve procrastinated when coming up with the future tense. And by the time he got to it, he couldn't come up with a good set of endings to use for it because all the other good ones had been taken. Now, let's say that on the same day, Steve was babysitting his brother's really annoying baby. While Steve was thinking, the baby was shouting out all sorts of random nonsense, like boo bee 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 boo. But that gave Steve a really good idea. Why not turn a bunch of baby gibberish into the endings for Latin verbs? He separated the jargon into syllables, bo, bee, 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 boo, and then decided to add the basic present endings to the ends, O-S-T, M-U-S, T-I-S, and T. And so he came up with the endings, bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, but. These endings were extremely easy to use. For verbs like amo, amare from the first declension, or sedeo, sedere from the second, all you had to do was stick them right on after chopping off the RE from the second principal part to have yourself your future form. Steve could have left it like that for the third declension verbs like curo, curere, and had a nice simple time with it. However, for some reason unbeknownst to anyone, he changed his mind halfway through writing down those rules. He decided that for third IO, and fourth conjugation verbs, you'd do something completely different to turn it into the future tense. Let me remind you that third IO, and fourth verbs use I's at the ends of their present verbs when you form them, no E's or A's. Well, I guess Steve was a fan of that present tense, because his new plan for these 3 conjugations was instead of using bo, bis, bit, he was going to add in E's to the endings of the verbs and call them future verbs. He introduced the endings es, et, ms, etis, ent, which you notice look really similar to the ost, mus, tis, and t endings of the present stem. For these endings, Steve chopped off the RE of the second principal part of the verbs, though he did let the fourths and third IOs keep their I's, and plugged in the new endings instead. Now, you may have noticed that these verbs look really similar to the present forms of second conjugation verbs, like said it, probably because both forms have an E in their ending. But you have to remember that they're completely different, have different translations as well. Third and fourth verbs are extremely deceptive. You're probably going to come up upon a time where you have to translate these types of verbs. The only way you'll really be able to tell a difference is by finding the dictionary information for the verbs. You can see that verbs like curo, curere follow the o-ere pattern, are therefore third conjugation future verbs, while sedeo, sedere follows the ao-ere pattern, and is therefore a second conjugation present verb. So in conclusion, the way you put into the future tense the first and second conjugations and the third IO, and fourth conjugations are completely different. You do take the infinitives of both sides and then chop off the RE and add the I for third IO and fourth, but not for third because it doesn't use one, and then you add on the various endings. For the first and second, you use bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, but, and for the third IO and fourth, you use es, et, ms, etis, ent. Now let's try some practice. Form and translate the second singular future form of the Latin verb dormio, dormire, dormire, dormitus, to sleep. Okay, so the Latin verb dormio, dormire, dormire, dormitus, if you look at its first and second principal parts, you'll find that follows the io, ire pattern of verb conjugation. That means that's a fourth conjugation verb. So I won't be using the bobis bit endings, but we'll instead be using the es, et, emis, etis, ent endings. So now we're looking for the second singular ending, so we'll be using es. So you're going to take the second principal part, chop off the re, and add on es, and you'll have your Latin verb. Now, you'll just add the verb will to your English translation, and you'll have the perfect word and translation for dormio, dormire. Now let's try this next problem. Form and translate the first plural future form of the Latin verb habeo, habere, habui, habitus, to own. Habeo, habere follows the eo, ere pattern, so it must be a second conjugation verb. That means that instead of es, et, this time we'll be using bo, bis, bit. Now we're looking for the first plural verb, so we'll be using bimus as an ending. So you just add it onto the verb stem, once again dropping off the re, and then bimus, and then you're good. And of course we'll translate as we will own, because you add the will into the English translation. Hopefully you got both of these right. And that concludes today's lesson. Thanks for watching.